The moment I stepped out of Malo Virelli's office, I realized something had already changed inside me. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in something quieter and far more dangerous, like a door had closed somewhere deep in my chest and I didn't know where the key was anymore. And as the guards guided me through the dim corridors of the Obsidian Crown with their steady footsteps and unreadable expressions, I found myself replaying everything that had just happened over and over again in my head. The rules, the deal, the calm way he had spoken about my life as if it were just another transaction. And no matter how many times I tried to twist it into something less serious, something temporary, it always came back to the same terrifying truth, that I wasn't walking out of this place the same person who had walked in. Because people like Malo didn't play games, and they definitely didn't forget. And the deeper we moved into the building, the quieter it became, until the noise of the casino floor faded completely into nothing, replaced by a silence that felt controlled and intentional, like every sound in this place existed only when it was allowed to. And when we stopped in front of a private elevator and one of the guards entered a code without a word, I felt the tight knot in my stomach pull even tighter as the door slid open and I caught a glimpse at my reflection in the mirrored walls, my messy hair, the tension in my eyes, the faint trace of panic I hadn't been able to hide. And for a second I barely recognized myself, because the person staring back looked like someone who had already lost something important, even if he couldn't name it yet. And when the elevator began to descend, I leaned back slightly against the wall and exhaled slowly, trying to steady my thoughts, trying to think of something, anything that could get me out of this situation. But every idea felt weak the moment it formed, because the truth was painfully simple. I had no power here. None at all. And that realization settled heavily in my chest as the numbers ticked down one by one, each floor taking me further away from the version of my life where I still had choices. And when the doors finally opened again, we stepped into a part of the building that felt completely different from everything else I had seen so far. The lighting softer, the atmosphere quieter, the kind of place that didn't need to show its importance because it was already understood. And as we walked down a long hallway lined with closed doors and subtle security cameras tucked into corners, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another part of the casino. This was something more private, more controlled, something designed for people who operated behind the scenes. And when we finally stopped in front of one of the doors and the guard unlocked it before stepping aside, I hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside, half expecting something cold or empty. But instead I was met with a space that looked more like a luxury apartment than anything else. A large bed neatly made, modern furniture arranged perfectly, soft lighting casting a warm glow across the room, and a wide window revealing the glowing skyline of Velmora City stretching endlessly into the night. And for a second the normalcy of it all threw me off balance, because it didn't match what I had just experienced. It didn't match the man who had just told me I belonged to him. And as I slowly moved further into the room trying to process it, one of the guards spoke for the first time. His voice calm but firm as he explained that this would be my room and that I wasn't allowed to leave without permission. And just like that, any illusion of comfort disappeared, because it didn't matter how nice the space looked, it was still a cage. And when the door closed behind them with a quiet click, I stood there for a few seconds in complete silence, listening to the absence of everything. No footsteps, no voices, nothing but the faint hum of the city outside. And I ran a hand through my hair as I let out a slow breath, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do now, because running wasn't an option and arguing had already been taken off the table. And the only thing left was to play along, at least for now, to survive long enough to understand the rules of this new world I had been dragged into. And as I walked toward the window and looked out at the city lights below, I couldn't help but think about how easily everything had changed. How one stupid decision had pulled me into something so much bigger than I had ever imagined. And for the first time that night I allowed myself to feel it fully. The fear, the uncertainty, the weight of knowing that my life was no longer entirely mine. And I stayed there for a while, just staring out at Velmora, trying to convince myself that this was temporary, that I would find a way out of this. But deep down I already knew the truth I didn't want to face, that people like Malo Virelli didn't make temporary arrangements. And whatever this was, whatever he wanted from me, it was only just beginning. And I don't know how long I stood there staring at the city, trying to convince myself that I was still in control of something, anything. But eventually reality settled back into my bones like cold water, and I forced myself to move, to explore the space I had just been locked into, as if understanding it would somehow give me an advantage. And I walked slowly around the room, taking in every detail, the expensive furniture, the untouched surfaces, The quiet precision of everything, because nothing in Malo Virelli's world felt accidental, not even the way a room was arranged. And when I reached the wardrobe and opened it, I paused for a second as I realized it wasn't empty. It was filled with clothes, neatly arranged, different sizes, different styles, but all dark, all expensive, all clearly not chosen at random. And that was when the realization hit me again, heavier this time, that this wasn't a temporary holding space, this was preparation, like he had already decided I would be staying long enough to need more than just the clothes on my back. And I let out a quiet breath as I closed the wardrobe and stepped back, running my hand over my face as my thoughts started racing again, trying to figure out what kind of game I had just been pulled into. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It couldn't be, not for someone like Malo. 70,000 meant nothing to him, so whatever he wanted from me had nothing to do with the debt itself. And that thought sat uneasily in my chest as I moved toward the small table near the bed, where a single glass of water had been placed like someone had anticipated exactly what I would need. And I picked it up slowly, staring at it for a second before taking a sip, the coolness grounding me just enough to think clearly again. And that was when I heard it. A soft click from the door behind me, so quiet I almost missed it, but my body reacted instantly as I turned around sharply, my heart jumping into my throat as the door opened and one of the guards stepped in without knocking, his expression as neutral as ever as he spoke in a calm voice that Malo wanted to see me again. And for a brief second something like panic flashed through me because I hadn't even had time to process the first conversation, and now I was being pulled back into it again. But I swallowed it down quickly because there was no point showing fear here, not when it wouldn't change anything. And I nodded once before following him out of the room, the door closing behind me once more as we walked back down the same quiet hallway. And this time the silence felt heavier, more intentional, like it was pressing down on me with every step. And as we entered the elevator again, I caught my reflection once more and noticed how different I looked already. Not physically, but in the way my eyes held something sharper now, more aware, like I was beginning to understand the rules of this place even if I didn't like them. And when the elevator doors opened, we didn't return to the office, but instead walked toward a different section of the floor, one that felt less formal, but no less controlled. And when the guard finally stopped and opened another door for me, I stepped inside cautiously, only to find Malo standing by the large window with his back turned, his silhouette outlined by the glowing city lights behind him. And for a moment he didn't acknowledge my presence at all, as if he already knew I was there and didn't feel the need to rush anything. And the guard quietly stepped out, leaving the two of us alone once again in a silence that felt far more intense than before. And I stood there unsure if I should speak or wait until Malo decided to, because everything about him suggested that he operated on his own time, his own rules. And finally, after what felt like minutes, it was probably only seconds, he spoke without turning around, his voice calm and steady as he asked if I had seen my room. And I answered carefully, keeping my tone neutral as I said yes. And there was a brief pause before he turned slightly, just enough for me to see the side of his face. He continued, saying that comfort was important for people who stayed under his roof because discomfort made people unpredictable, and he didn't like unpredictability. And something about the way he said it made it clear that this wasn't a kindness, it was control. And I felt that same unease settle back into my chest as I realized everything he did had a purpose. Even something as simple as giving me a place to stay. And then he finally turned fully to face me, his dark eyes locking onto mine with that same calm intensity that made it impossible to look away. And he took a slow step closer as he asked a question that caught me completely off guard, asking what I had been thinking about while standing at the window. And for a split second I hesitated because the truth was dangerous and lies are no longer allowed. And that contradiction twisted inside me painfully as I tried to find an answer that wouldn't push me closer to whatever consequences came with breaking his rules. And in that moment I understood something new, something I hadn't fully grasped before, that this wasn't just about obedience or survival anymore. This was a test. A slow, careful process of breaking down everything I thought I knew and rebuilding it into something that fit inside Malo Virelli's world. And as I stood there under his gaze with my thoughts caught somewhere between truth and survival, I realized that whatever this was, whatever he was turning me into, it had already begun.